Hello, my name is Martha Butler, and I'd like to talk about closing the achievement gap today. Many years ago, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with my oldest daughter, staring at the stack of reading assignments that seemed to take her twice as long as everyone else. She was bright, she loved math, she asked thoughtful questions, but reading and writing felt heavy for her. And I remember wondering, is this about her ability? Or is this something about the structure around her making this harder than it needs to be? What if the gap is not about student ability, but about design? I want to explore how Montessori design, when aligned intentionally with inclusion, can change outcomes for students with disabilities. And I want to speak about this not just from what I've learned in this course, but from what I've lived as a parent. The achievement gap for students with disabilities is real. Students with learning differences consistently show lower reading and math scores, lower graduation rates, higher discipline referrals. But behind those statistics are still children, bright children, capable children, children who are often working twice as hard just to keep up. I watched this unfold with my own daughter. She was intelligent. She was curious, but reading and writing didn't come easily. Just the math did. But as expectations increased, the gap widened. Not because she lacked ability, but because the structure around her did not match how her brain processed information. That distinction matters. This matters for several reasons. First, delays widen the gap. When we wait for a child to struggle significantly before offering support, we lose valuable time. Second, fear of labeling often prevents early help. Families hesitate, schools hesitate, and during that hesitation, confidence slowly erodes. Third, the principles of least restrictive environment is often misunderstood. Inclusion is not simply placing a child in general education classroom. It's ensuring that the environment truly supports them once they are there. Access without support is not inclusion, and this is where design becomes essential. Universal Design for Learning, UDL, shifted something for me. It moves the question from how do we fix this child to how do we design the environment differently from the beginning. That shift feels subtle, but it changes everything. UDL assumes that variability is normal, not rare, not exceptional, normal. So instead of waiting for the child to struggle and then layering on accommodations, we build flexibility into the structure from the start. Multiple ways to engage, multiple ways to access information, multiple ways to show understanding. It does not lower expectation, it removes barriers that do not need to be there. When I began looking at Montessori through that lens, I realized something quite quietly powerful. Much of that flexibility is already embedded into the method. Historically, students with disability were often excluded entirely. Exclusion, segregation, integration, and inclusion. But inclusion didn't happen overnight. It developed over decades through advocacy, research, and policy, culminating in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA guaranteed access to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. That was monumental. For the first time, students had a legal right to be educated alongside their peers. But access alone does not guarantee belonging. We are now in the next stage of the conversation. Not simply access, but thoughtful design. When I observe a Montessori classroom, I see inclusion built into the structure itself. Children move at their own pace, so they are not constantly being compared to one another. The materials are multisensory, which allows students to process information in different ways through movement, repetition, and hands-on work. Movement is part of learning, not something that needs to be controlled. The materials are self-correcting, which protects dignity. A child can recognize an error quietly, and the mixed age environment normalizes variability. Not everyone is on the same lesson at the same time, and that reduces comparison. My daughter began her education in Montessori. Looking back, I can see how much that structure supported her. The pacing, the movement, the dignity built in the materials. When she moved into a more traditional setting, the structure became more fixed. And that shift was hard for her. In Montessori, difference does not stand out, it blends in. The flexibility is not layered on later, it is already there. When I reflect honestly, what would have helped her earlier? Clear steps, less overwhelming, more confidence, not easier work, not lowering expectations, but structure that made expectations visible. When expectations are visible, the brain does not have to hold everything at once. And when cognitive load decreases, independence increases. This principle applies to children and honestly to adults as well. In my administrative role, I oversee children's files. It's a multi-step process tied to licensing requirements. The images on this slide show the final stages of those files once all the documents have been collected and entered into the computer system. But that physical organization is extremely important to the licensing representative who manually reviews each file. If that process lives only in someone's head, the files stall, things get missed. But when the steps are sequenced clearly and tracked visually, the structure carries the weight. The same principle applies to visual schedules for students with ADHD or dyslexia. Clear steps, defined routines, reduce cognitive load. This is not complicated, it's intentional. This is what it looks like when philosophy becomes practice. My daughter began in Montessori. As I said, looking back, I could see how the structure supported her early learning. That pacing, that movement, that dignity built into the materials. When she transitioned into the more traditional setting, the flexibility narrowed. As expectations increased, she struggled more than she needed to. By her junior year of high school, she was receiving failing grades. We applied for a 504 plan and began medication. Those supports made a significant difference, not because she suddenly became capable, but because the structure around her changed. She never gave up. Today, she holds a degree in statistics and an MBA in finance. She works in risk analysis and writes code every day at a successful investment company in Houston. She was never incapable. She needed structure that supported how her brain worked. When we design classrooms that anticipate variability, we're not lowering expectations, We are protecting confidence. We're preserving dignity, and we are expanding possibilities. The achievement gap for students with disability is not only about ability, it's about design. And design is something we can change. Thank you.